John Garand's rifle helped win World War II, but most owners today don't know the 20 secrets that quietly damage it, tank its value, or nearly get someone hurt. From ammunition that bends steel to rifles worth 10 times their sticker price, one wrong assumption costs real money. Number 20 starts with a mistake almost every first-time owner makes. Number 20 is the loose gas cylinder problem, and it fools almost every new owner. Pick up an M1 Garand for the first time and shake the front hand guard. It rattles. Many owners assume something is broken and rush to tighten it. But according to the civilian marksmanship program, this looseness was built into the rifle on purpose. Soldiers in the field needed to strip the rifle down with only the tools in their pocket, so engineers left clearance between the gas cylinder and the barrel splines. That same clearance lets the barrel expand from heat during rapid fire without throwing off the sights. Forcing a repair that was never needed can actually hurt accuracy instead of fixing it, so before you spend money on a gunsmith visit, know that a little wiggle in the front end is normal, not a warning sign. That same instinct to fix something that isn't broken shows up again with dry firing. Number 19 is the dry fire myth, and it has scared new owners for decades. Most modern rifles warn you never to pull the trigger on an empty chamber, so naturally Garand owners assume the same rule applies here. It does not. During World War II, recruits dry-fired their M1 rifles thousands of times in basic training with no damage at all, because the firing pin and hammer were built for exactly that kind of practice. Collectors and competitive shooters confirm the same thing today, calling it one of the few military rifles genuinely safe to dry fire as much as you want. The real danger is not dry firing itself, and it shows up in the very next secret. Number 18 is the real danger dry firing gets blamed for by mistake, and it is firing out of battery. This happens if the bolt is not fully locked shut when the rifle fires, and it is exactly why John Garand built a camming lug onto the hammer. That lug physically blocks the hammer from striking the firing pin unless the bolt has rotated all the way into place. Gunsmiths point to this small metal lug as one of the most important safety features on the rifle, because a cartridge that fires while the bolt is out of battery can rupture and turn the action into broken metal and splinters. It usually happens on rifles with a worn or damaged camming lug that was never inspected, and a quick check of this single part can prevent a repair bill that costs more than the rifle itself. The loading process brings its own well-known hazard, one that soldiers nicknamed almost 100 years ago. Number 17 is Garand thumb, and it remains the most famous injury tied to any American service rifle. The M1 loads from an 8-round steel clip called an en-bloc clip, and when that clip is pressed into the action, the bolt can snap forward with enough force to slam into an unprotected thumb. Soldiers in World War II dealt with this so often that the injury earned its own nickname, and shooters still experience it at ranges today. The fix is simple once you know it. Keep the back of your hand against the operating rod handle while you press the clip down with your thumb. Then pull your hand away quickly before the bolt closes. New owners who skip this technique often get a painful surprise on their very first range trip, and repeated impacts can lead to real bruising or even a small fracture. Loading the rifle safely is only half the job. What happens after you shoot matters just as much, especially with older ammunition. Number 16 is corrosive ammunition, and it quietly destroys more Garands than any battlefield ever did. Much of the surplus 30-10-6 ammunition sold for decades used corrosive primers, which leave behind salt residue that pulls moisture from the air and eats away at steel. A quick wipe of the bore is not enough. Owners need to fully strip the gas cylinder, operating rod and barrel, and rinse them with hot water to dissolve the salts, then dry and oil every part completely. Skip this step and you risk a pitted bore or a frozen action, turning a valuable rifle into one worth a fraction of its price. Corrosion is not the only thing hiding inside an untouched Garand. Sometimes the enemy is the very grease that protected it for 70 years. Number 15 is Cosmoline, the thick petroleum grease the military used to protect rifles in storage since the product was first trademarked in 1892. It worked so well that many Garands still look excellent decades later, but that same grease soaks deep into the wood stock, not just the surface. Wiping the outside with a rag does almost nothing, because heat from firing or even a warm day pulls fresh grease out of the wood pores and leaves a sticky mess all over again. Gun cleaning specialists recommend gently heating the stock until the grease rises to the surface, then wiping it away in small sections. Number 14 is ammunition compatibility, and it is the single most repeated warning across the entire Garand community for good reason. Hornady's own chief ballistic scientist has explained that standard modern factory 3006 ammunition uses slower burning powders that create higher gas port pressure than the rifle was designed for, putting violent stress on the operating rod, bolt, and receiver every time it fires. The civilian marksmanship program backs this up directly, warning owners never to fire ammunition loaded beyond 50,000 cupor bullets heavier than about 172 grains. The safest choice is ammunition specifically labeled for the M1 Garand, usually 150 to 168 grain load, or the CMP's own Creedmoor branded ammunition built to the correct pressure curve. Number 13 is the operating rod design change. Most owners never notice until they try to date their rifle. Early Garand operating rods were machined with a sharp 90-degree angle at one bend, and that sharp corner made them prone to stress fractures under heavy use. The Army later retrofitted rifles with a redesigned rod that included a smooth relief cut at that same spot to stop the cracking. A rifle still running the older sharp angle rod carries a real risk of cracking under stress, and collectors also use this detail to check whether a rifle's parts genuinely match its production era, since a relief-cut rod paired with a very early receiver can be a clue that parts were swapped somewhere along the way. Speaking of matching parts to production era, nothing tells that story better than the serial number stamped on the receiver. Number 12 is the serial number range, and it is the closest thing to a birth certificate the rifle has. Springfield Armory production ran from serial number 1 past 6 million across its full history, while Winchester used separate ranges during World War II. And International Harvester and Harrington and Richardson picked up new ranges during the Korean War. Researchers and the National Park Service have published month-by-month tables showing exactly when each range left the factory, letting an owner date their rifle and check whether the barrel, stock cartouche, and receiver all belong to the same era. A serial number in the very first 100 made is considered extremely rare, while a mismatch between the serial number and the part's dates can signal a rifle reassembled from spare parts. Serial numbers only make sense once you understand how differently each manufacturer contributed to the total run. Number 11 is manufacturer rarity, and it changes the value of an otherwise identical-looking rifle by a wide margin. Springfield Armory alone produced roughly 4,190,000 M1 rifles across its entire history, the most common name stamped on a Garand receiver. Winchester, the only private company to build the rifle during World War II, made about 513,000 rifles between 1941 and 1945, a tiny fraction of total wartime output. When the Korean War restarted production, International Harvester built about 337,000 rifles, and Harrington and Richardson built about 428,000. Both far scarcer than Springfield's numbers. Because Winchester's wartime output was so limited, a genuine Winchester Garand in good condition consistently commands a stronger price than an otherwise identical Springfield rifle. That collector premium on real wartime manufacturers is exactly why one modern company causes so much confusion at gun shows today. Number 10 is the Springfield Armory Incorporated mix-up, and it trips up more first-time buyers than almost anything else on this list. The original government-owned Springfield Armory that built wartime Garands closed in the 1960s. Decades later, a private company in Illinois adopted the same famous name and began making its own Garands with cast receivers, starting its serial numbers at 7 million and higher. These commercial rifles function fine and even use some rebuilt surplus parts, but they were never built at the historic government armory and generally carry little to no collector value compared to genuine wartime or Korean War-era production. Buyers who see the name Springfield Armory stamped on a receiver and assume they found a rare wartime rifle can end up paying collector prices for a modern commercial rifle. Confusing a modern company for a historic one is one problem. Some sellers take the deception a step further with the stock itself. Number 9 is the fake cartouche problem, and collectors have documented it for years on dedicated firearms forums. Every original M1 stock carries a small stamped mark called a cartouche, showing the manufacturer and the inspector who approved it. Forgers have learned to copy these stamps, but experienced collectors spot the fakes by comparing tiny details, like the shape of a single letter or how deep the stamp actually sits in the wood grain. This same environment has produced entirely invented stories, including sellers claiming to have a rare wartime tanker Garand, a variant that never officially existed. Buyers who trust a story without checking the actual stamps and paperwork can pay thousands of dollars for a rifle carrying a completely fabricated history. Even rifles sold through the most trusted source in the hobby are not immune to this kind of mismatch. Number 8 is a detail that surprises even careful buyers who order directly from the civilian marksmanship program. Because every returned Garand was fully disassembled, sorted, and rebuilt from bins of interchangeable parts during military overhauls, a CMP rifle labeled with a single manufacturer's grade can still arrive with a mix of parts from different production years or even different companies. A receiver dated to 1943 might carry a trigger group typical of 1945 production, simply because the parts were never individually serial numbered and were treated as interchangeable during rebuilds. This is normal for a shooter-grade rifle and does not affect safety or function, but buyers hoping for a fully matching, single manufacturer collector rifle need to seek out CMP's higher graded collector or correct grade rifles, since standard grades make no promise that every part shares the same birthday. Parts history is one hidden cost, where the rifle physically traveled after military service creates another one, stamped right into the metal. Number 7 is the import stamp, and it can quietly cut a rifle's value even when everything else about it is genuine. Federal law has required that any firearm imported into the United States after January of 2002 carry the importer's name stamped visibly on the barrel, slide, or receiver. Many Garands were sent overseas as military aid to countries like Greece, Italy, and Denmark, and some of those same rifles later came back to America through commercial import channels rather than government surplus programs. Collector guides confirm this required stamp is seen by the market as a distraction from the rifle's original historic finish. A genuine CMP surplus rifle bought directly from the U.S. government will never carry an import mark, so its presence is one of the fastest ways to spot a longer, less documented path to your hands. Some rifles skip that longer path entirely and go straight into serious competition, where accuracy gets fine-tuned down to the smallest part. Number 6 is gas cylinder timing, a detail that separates an ordinary shooter from a rifle tuned for real competition. Testing conducted at the Navy's Pax River Range found that the fit of the front end, meaning the handguard, gas cylinder, and lock, had the greatest single impact on the rifle's accuracy. Competition armorers select and rotate the gas cylinder lock to a specific clock position, then physically peen the barrel's spline cuts to remove all looseness before final assembly. None of this is required for safe function. and issued service rifles were never built this precisely. But owners chasing tighter groups at long range should know this technique exists, since it explains why two seemingly identical Garands can shoot noticeably different group sizes at the target. That same competition-focused tuning is exactly what created one of the most valuable factory-built variants of the entire rifle. Number 5 is the National Match Garand, a designation that only applies to specific rifles built at Springfield Armory between roughly 1953 and 1963 for serious competitive shooting. These rifles came with tighter tolerances, glass-bedded stocks, and specialized national match sights built for precision at distance. When national match sales were suspended in 1973, thousands of remaining rifles were disassembled, and a large batch, including 5,677 national match rifles, was sent to Greece, where the special sights were removed and replaced with standard ones, effectively erasing their national match identity. Genuine national match rifles with original serialized paperwork are rare and demand a real premium today, but buyers need to specifically verify that paperwork, since a standard Garand can be dressed up to look like a national match rifle without actually being one. National match rifles were built for the target range. A much smaller group of Garands were built for something far more serious. Number 4 is the M1C sniper rifle, and its rarity is almost hard to believe once you see the numbers. The Army originally ordered 21,158 M1C rifles during World War II, but manufacturing problems and a shortage of telescopic sights meant fewer than 8,000 were actually completed before the war ended. That makes a genuine wartime M1C dramatically rarer than a standard infantry Garand, and auction houses have estimated values between $4,500 and $6,500 for verified examples, sometimes higher with strong provenance. The M1C was eventually followed by the simpler M1D, which converted standard existing Garands into snipers instead of building new ones from scratch, making it more common but still valuable. Both variants attract fakes claiming sniper history, so authentic examples always come with real documentation, not just a scope bolted onto a standard rifle. As rare as the M1C is, one earlier version of the Garand is even harder to find because almost the entire batch was destroyed by design. Number 3 is the original gas trap Garand, built only between 1936 and 1940, before the redesigned gas port system replaced it. Because these early rifles were recalled and converted to the newer system during routine ordnance maintenance, almost none survive today in their original unaltered configuration. Rock Island Auction Company has sold verified gas trap Garands for $54,625 and $57,500 respectively, prices that rival some of the most expensive military collectibles in existence. What makes this dangerous for buyers is that the individual parts needed to fake a gas trap rifle exist on the collector market, so an unverified gas trap Garand needs serious expert authentication before anyone pays anywhere close to those numbers, whether a rifle is an ultra-rare gas trap model or a standard wartime Springfield. The entire market shifted dramatically in just the last 2 years. Number 2 is the biggest shift in the entire Garand market, and most casual buying guides online have not caught up to it. Between October of 2024 and December of 2025, the civilian marksmanship program sold out of its service-grade, rack-grade, M1C sniper, and field-grade surplus rifles in sequence. And as of February of 2026, the only surplus grades still listed are Expert Grade at $1,150 and the Custom Shop Special at $1,650. This is not a temporary restock delay. The government's original surplus warehouse inventory was a finite pool, and once it emptied, there was no supply behind it. Number 1 is the ultimate example of how documented history multiplies a rifle's value beyond anything condition alone can explain. In 2015, A personal M1 Garand once owned by President John F. Kennedy sold at Rock Island Auction Company for $149,500, a price that dwarfs even the rarest gas trap and M1C rifles on this list. The rifle itself was mechanically an ordinary Garand. What made it worth that price was the documented, verifiable chain of ownership connecting it to a specific, famous person in history.